They say the woods remember everything, and on one silent morning, a lonely bounty hunter named Asa Calder found something the land wished it could forget. A young enslaved woman, Mira, hanging from a tree, barely breathing, with a wooden sign on her chest that read, "White man, don't forgive." Most men would have walked away. Asa didn't. And when she woke, trembling and furious, she told him the truth. She wasn't hung as punishment. She was hung as bait, and the men who did it were hunting him too. Two strangers, both marked for death, now tied together by the same monster. Master Halston, a man who built his power on fear, cruelty, and bodies no one buried. But here's the part the South never saw coming. The girl they tried to kill refused to run, and the man who lived alone chose to stay and fight beside her. What followed wasn't justice. It was a reckoning. Because once Asa cut Mira down from that tree, neither of them ever bowed again. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun filtered through the Georgia pines in broken shafts of gold and amber. Asa Calder guided his horse along a path that barely deserved the name. More dirt and root than road. His body ached. His throat was dry. 3 weeks of tracking had ended with nothing. The fugitive had slipped away 2 nights ago, vanished like smoke. Asa shifted in his saddle, feeling the familiar burn in his lower back. His horse, a gray mare he had owned for 5 years, moved with the slow exhaustion of an animal that had covered too many miles. He patted her neck. She huffed in response. The woods pressed close on both sides. Thick undergrowth, vines that tangled and climbed. The air hung heavy with moisture. Insects hummed in rhythm. A low, constant buzz that filled the spaces between his thoughts. Asa removed his hat and wiped the sweat from his forehead. His skin was dark and weathered from years spent outdoors. His hair, cut short and graying at the temples, bore witness to the decades he had survived. He was lean, hard, built from long days of walking, riding, tracking. He had been a bounty hunter for 15 years. Before that, he had been many things. Most of them he tried not to remember. The horse slowed near a cluster of moss-covered oak. Asa let her rest. He listened to the forest. No birds sang. That struck him as odd, though he could not say why. Just a feeling, a tightness in his chest. He thought about the bounty he had lost, a thief who had stabbed a shopkeeper in Macon. The reward had been $40. Not enough to live well, but enough to keep moving. Asa needed that money. His supplies were running low. His ammunition was almost gone. He had spent 3 weeks following cold trails and dead ends. The thief had outsmarted him. It happened sometimes. Asa did not like to fail, but he had learned long ago that pride was a luxury men like him could not afford. The region had changed in recent months. More hostility, more suspicion. White men traveled in armed groups now. They watched the roads. They questioned strangers. Asa had been stopped twice in the past month by men who wanted to know his business. He always carried his papers. Documents that proved he was free. Documents that explained his work. Still, papers meant nothing to men who did not care about rules. Asa's reputation was a double-edged thing. Some sheriffs respected him. They knew he brought in dangerous men. They paid him what he was owed. Others hated him. They saw a black man with a gun and assumed he was the danger. He preferred the woods to towns. Out here, he answered to no one. Asa urged his horse forward. The path widened slightly, and he spotted a creek cutting through the trees. The water moved slow and shallow over smooth stones. He decided to make camp. He dismounted and led the mare to the water. She drank deeply. Asa filled his canteen and took a long swallow. The water tasted clean but faintly metallic. He unsaddled the horse and tied her to a low branch where she could graze. Then he gathered kindling. The forest floor was damp, but he found enough dry wood beneath fallen logs to start a small fire. As the flames grew, Asa opened his saddlebag and pulled out a small iron pot. He filled it with water from the creek and set it over the fire. Then he added a handful of beans he had been soaking in a cloth pouch. While the beans warmed, he sat back against a tree and pulled out his stack of bounty posters. He had collected 7 over the past 2 months. Most were standard. Men wanted for theft, assault, or desertion. The rewards ranged from $15 to $60. Asa studied each one carefully, memorizing faces and details. One poster caught his attention. It was newer than the others. The ink was dark and bold. At the top, in large letters, it read, "Reward for capture." Below that, a name, Asa Calder. Asa stared at it. The poster described him in vague terms. Black male, approximately 35-40 years old, armed and dangerous, wanted for interfering with family affairs and disrupting lawful business. At the bottom, a signature, Garrett Halston, Halston Plantation. Asa did not recognize the name. He had never heard of Halston Plantation. He had never crossed this man or his family. He frowned and read the poster again. The reward was listed as $100. That was more than most fugitives fetched, more than Asa had ever earned on a single bounty. He folded the poster and slipped it back into his bag. He told himself it was a mistake. Perhaps another man with the same name. Perhaps someone had lied to Halston, using Asa's reputation to settle a grudge. It happened sometimes. Asa stirred the beans and ate slowly from the pot. The food was bland but filling. He chewed carefully, letting the warmth settle in his stomach. Dusk fell quickly. The light faded from gold to gray to deep blue. The fire crackled softly. Asa leaned back and watched the stars appear through the gaps in the trees. Then he heard it, a faint creaking sound, rhythmic, distant. Asa sat up and listened. The sound came from deeper in the woods. It reminded him of a gate swinging on old hinges, or a branch bending under weight. He waited. The creaking continued, slow, steady. Asa considered investigating but decided against it. Animals sometimes moved through the forest at night. Deer, possums, raccoons. The sound was probably nothing. He poured water over the fire and watched the embers die. Smoke rose in thin spirals. He spread his bedroll near the base of the tree and lay down, resting his head on his saddle. The creaking persisted in the darkness. Asa closed his eyes and let exhaustion pull him under. The crow's caw woke him. Asa opened his eyes to a pale gray sky. Morning had arrived without fanfare. The forest was quiet except for that single bird, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the trees. He sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in his shoulders and neck. His body protested the hard ground. He had slept poorly. Dreams had kept him half awake, fragments of voices and footsteps that dissolved when he tried to focus on them. The crow cawed again. Asa stood and stretched. His joints popped. He rolled his shoulders and looked around the camp. Everything was as he had left it. His horse grazed nearby. His saddlebag lay undisturbed against the tree. He walked to the creek to gather water. The air felt cooler this morning. A thin mist clung to the ground, drifting between the trees like something alive. Asa knelt by the water's edge and dipped his canteen beneath the surface. The creek moved slowly, barely more than a trickle. As he lifted the canteen, he caught it. A smell, faint at first, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable once noticed. Sour, human, wrong. Asa stood and turned slowly, scanning the trees. The smell drifted from somewhere deeper in the woods. Not close, but not far either. He capped the canteen and set it down. His hand moved instinctively to the knife on his belt. He listened. Nothing. No movement. No sound except the creak and the distant crow. Asa hesitated. Every instinct told him to ignore it, to pack up and leave. Whatever waited in those woods was not his concern, but the smell lingered, and beneath it, something else, a feeling he could not name. A pull. He followed it. Asa moved carefully through the undergrowth, stepping over roots and pushing aside low-hanging branches. The mist thickened as he walked. It clung to his legs and dampened his boots. The smell grew stronger. After several minutes, he saw it. A figure hanging from a tree. Asa stopped. The figure was small, thin, human. A young woman dangled from a rope tied to a thick branch above. Her head hung forward. Her arms hung limp at her sides. She wore a torn dress, stained dark in places. Around her neck, the rope had cut deep grooves into her skin. Asa approached slowly. She was black, young, maybe 20 years old. Her face was swollen, bruised. Her feet hung several inches above the ground. A wooden sign was tied to her chest with rough twine. The words were carved in uneven letters. "White man, don't forgive." Asa's breath caught. He moved closer and reached out. His fingers found her wrist. He pressed 2 fingers against the underside, searching. A pulse. Weak. Faint. But there. She was alive. Asa pulled his knife and sawed through the rope as quickly as he could. The fibers split and frayed. The woman's body began to drop, and Asa caught her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than he expected, all bone and barely any weight. He lowered her carefully onto the ground and checked her breathing. Shallow, irregular, but present. Asa cut the twine holding the sign and pulled it away from her chest. He tossed it aside. Then he examined the rope around her neck. It had been tied with a slip knot, designed to tighten slowly, rather than snap the neck outright. This was not meant to kill her quickly. This was meant to torture. Asa worked the rope loose and pulled it away. The skin beneath was raw and bleeding. He could see the outline of the fibers pressed into her flesh. He leaned close and listened to her breathing again. Still shallow, still weak. She needed water, medicine, shelter. Asa lifted her into his arms and stood. She barely weighed anything. Her head lolled against his shoulder. He turned back toward his camp, but stopped. Something felt wrong. Asa scanned the area around the tree. The ground was trampled. Boot prints. Multiple sets. Large. Heavy. Organized. He knelt and studied the tracks. 4 men. Maybe 5. They had stood in a circle around the tree. One set of tracks led away to the east. Another led west. Asa frowned. This was not a punishment. If they had wanted her dead, they would have killed her outright. If they had wanted to send a message, they would have left her where others could see. But this tree was deep in the woods, hidden, out of sight. This was bait. Asa felt the realization settle in his chest, like a stone. They had hung her where no one would find her quickly, where someone would have to search, where someone would have to follow the smell. They wanted someone to come. Asa stood and adjusted the woman in his arms. He moved quickly now, retracing his steps back to the creek. His mind worked through the possibilities. Slave catchers sometimes used traps. They would hang or chain someone in a remote location and wait for others to attempt a rescue. When someone came, they would spring the trap. But the tracks suggested the men had left. That made no sense unless they planned to return. Asa reached his camp and laid the woman down on his bedroll. He checked her pulse again. Still faint. Still there. He poured water from his canteen onto a cloth and pressed it gently against her forehead. Her skin was hot, feverish. He cleaned the rope burns on her neck as carefully as he could. The wounds were deep. They would scar. Asa lifted her head and brought the canteen to her lips. He let a few drops of water fall onto her tongue. She did not respond. He tried again. This time, her throat moved. She swallowed. Asa waited. Minutes passed. Then her eyes fluttered. She gasped. A sharp, desperate intake of breath. Asa leaned closer. "You're safe." Her eyes opened, wide, terrified. She tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. Asa brought the canteen to her lips again. "Drink." She drank. Small sips, choking slightly. When she pulled away, she stared at him. Her gaze moved from his face to the trees around them. Her breathing quickened. "Who did this?" Asa asked. She opened her mouth. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They're coming back." Asa froze. The woman's eyes rolled back, and she went limp again. Late morning crept across the forest floor in pale shafts of light. Asa knelt beside the small fire he had rebuilt. The flames were low, barely more than embers. He did not want smoke rising too high above the trees. In his hands, he held a battered tin cup. Inside, a bitter tea brewed from bark and wild herbs. The mixture smelled sharp and medicinal. He had learned to make it years ago from a freedman in Virginia, who said it helped with throat wounds. Asa glanced at Mira. She lay on his bedroll, her eyes half open. Her breathing was steadier now. The fever had broken sometime during the night. Her skin no longer burned to the touch. He had kept watch over her while she slept. Every few hours he had checked her pulse and given her water. She had not woken fully until dawn, when she opened her eyes and stared at him without speaking. Now she was awake enough to move, to think. Asa lifted the cup and tested the temperature with his finger. Still too hot. He set it down beside the fire and waited. Mira shifted on the bedroll. Her hand moved to her throat. She touched the raw skin there and winced. "Don't," Asa said. "You'll make it worse." Mira lowered her hand. She turned her head toward him. Her eyes were clearer now, focused. "Where am I?" she asked. Her voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. "Woods near the Georgia border," Asa said. "Few miles east of the river." Mira frowned. She tried to sit up, but the effort made her dizzy. She slumped back down. "Easy," Asa said. "You've been out for almost a full day." Mira stared at the canopy above. The light filtered through the leaves in shifting patterns. She watched it for several seconds before speaking again. "You cut me down." "Yes." "Why?" Asa did not answer immediately. He picked up the cup and tested the tea again. Cooler now. He brought it to her. "Drink this," he said. Mira took the cup with both hands. Her fingers trembled. She brought it to her lips and sipped carefully. The liquid burned her throat, and she coughed. "It's meant to help," Asa said. Mira took another sip, then another. When the cup was half empty, she handed it back to him. "Thank you," she said. Asa set the cup aside. He added a small branch to the fire and watched the flames catch. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mira." Asa nodded. "I'm Asa." Mira studied him. Her gaze moved from his face to the knife on his belt, then to the horse grazing nearby. "You're the bounty hunter," she said. Asa's eyes flicked back to her. "How do you know that?" Mira swallowed. Her hand moved to her throat again, and this time Asa did not stop her. "They talked about you," she said. "The men who hung me. They said they were hunting a black bounty man who crossed the master. They said your name." Asa Calder. Asa felt something tighten in his chest. "What else did they say?" Mira closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed as she gathered the memory. "They said you brought in one of the master's cousins a few weeks back, turned him over to the law for running a gambling den. The cousin got locked up. The master got angry." Asa remembered. A white man named Porter. He had been wanted for running an illegal operation in Savannah. The bounty had been high. Asa had taken the job without asking questions. He had not known the man was connected to anyone important. "The master put a price on you," Mira continued. $500, dead or alive." Asa went still. $500 was more than most bounties on fugitives. That kind of money would draw every tracker and opportunist in the region. "They were using you as bait," Asa said quietly. Mira opened her eyes. I know. Tell me what happened. Mira's voice grew softer, more fragile. I lived on Halston Plantation, she said. Me, my mother, my younger brother. We worked the fields. We kept our heads down. We didn't cause trouble. She paused. 2 nights ago, my mother spoke back to the master. He had been drinking. He got angry. He beat her in front of everyone. My brother tried to stop him. Mira's hands clenched into fists. The master killed them both, shot my mother in the chest, snapped my brother's neck with his own hands. Isa said nothing. I ran, Mira whispered. I didn't think. I just ran. They caught you. Yes, the militia. They dragged me back. They tied me up in the barn and questioned me. They wanted to know if anyone helped me, if I had spoken to anyone. Mira's breathing quickened. They tortured me, beat me, burned me. When they were done, they decided to use me as bait. They said they were hunting you. They said if they hung me in the woods, you might come looking. Or someone like you. Asa's jaw tightened. They hung me at night, Mira said. They stood around the tree and talked. They thought I was dead. They said they would come back in the morning to check the trap. Mira looked at Asa. You weren't supposed to find me this fast. Before Asa could respond, a sound cut through the forest. Hoofbeats. Asa stood immediately. He grabbed Mira's arm and pulled her upright. She gasped in pain, but he did not stop. Move, he said. He dragged her toward a cluster of thick bushes near the creek. The ground was soft there, muddy. Asa pushed her down into the mud and began covering her with branches and leaves. He worked quickly, layering the foliage over her body until she was nearly invisible. Don't move, he whispered. Don't breathe loud. Mira nodded. Asa stepped back and kicked dirt over the bedroll. He scattered the embers of the fire and grabbed his saddlebag. He moved to his horse and held its reins, keeping the animal calm. The hoofbeats grew louder. 4 riders emerged from the trees to the west. They wore dark coats and wide-brimmed hats. Rifles hung from their saddles. Asa recognized the insignia stitched onto their sleeves. A stylized H surrounded by a wreath. Halston's Militia. The riders moved slowly through the woods. Their horses picked their way over roots and fallen branches. The men scanned the ground as they rode. Asa stood perfectly still. His horse remained quiet. The riders reached the area where Mira had been hung. One of them dismounted and examined the tree. He ran his hand along the rope still tied to the branch. Rope's been cut, the man said. Another rider leaned forward in his saddle. Recent? Fresh cut. Maybe a day old. The first man knelt and studied the ground. He saw the boot prints. Asa's boot prints. Someone found her, the man said. The bounty hunter? Could be. The man stood and looked around. His gaze swept across the trees. For a moment, Asa thought the man was looking directly at him. Then the man turned back to his horse. The bait's gone, he said. He's close. The riders mounted and turned their horses east, toward Asa's camp. Asa watched them disappear into the trees. He waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely before moving. He returned to the bushes and pulled the branches away. Mira lay beneath, covered in mud and leaves. Her eyes were wide. Asa helped her sit up. They're heading for the camp, he said. Mira grabbed his wrist. Her grip was weak, but her voice was sharp. He won't stop, she said. Not until we bleed out like the rest. Asa looked down at her. We need to move, he said. Now. The sun had already begun its descent when Asa started packing. He moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion. Every item he selected had a purpose. Dried meat, wrapped in cloth. A hunting knife with a worn leather sheath. 2 pistols. One from his belt, one from his saddlebag. A small water pouch. A coil of rope. Flint and steel. He left everything else behind. The bedroll stayed where it was. The cooking pot remained beside the dead fire. Even the extra ammunition, too heavy, too loud, got buried in the dirt. Asa tied the supplies into a compact bundle and slung it across his shoulder. He turned to Mira. She had managed to stand. Barely. She leaned against a tree, one hand pressed against the bark for support. Her legs trembled beneath her weight. "Can you walk?" Asa asked. Mira nodded. She took one step forward and nearly collapsed. Asa caught her before she fell. He steadied her with one arm around her waist. "I can walk," Mira said through gritted teeth. "Not far," Asa said. He positioned himself beside her and let her lean against him. Together they moved toward the creek. The forest opened into swampland a mile east of the camp. The ground turned soft beneath their feet. Mud sucked at their boots with every step. The air grew thicker, heavier with moisture and the smell of rotting vegetation. Asa led them into the water. It was shallow at first, ankle-deep, then knee-deep. The mud beneath was slick and treacherous. Mira gasped as she sank deeper, but Asa held her upright. "Keep moving," he said. Insects swarmed around them. Mosquitoes bit at their necks and hands. The water rippled with unseen movement. Fish, snakes, things Asa did not care to identify. They waded through the swamp for nearly an hour before Asa found suitable ground. A small island of elevated earth surrounded by thick reeds. The trees here grew close together, their branches forming a natural canopy. The ground was wet but solid enough to sit on. Asa helped Mira onto the island and lowered her onto the driest patch he could find. She sat with her back against a cypress trunk, breathing hard. Asa surveyed the area. The reeds were tall enough to hide them from anyone passing by boat. The trees provided cover from above. It would do. He began constructing a shelter. He broke off low-hanging branches and wove them together with vines. He layered Spanish moss over the framework until it formed a crude roof. The structure was small, barely large enough for 2 people, but it would keep them dry and hidden. When he finished, he crawled inside and gestured for Mira to follow. She moved slowly, painfully. Once inside, she lay on her side and closed her eyes. Asa sat near the entrance. He pulled out the dried meat and offered her a piece. "Eat," he said. Mira took the meat, but did not bite into it immediately. She held it in her hand and stared at the water outside. "How long do we run?" she asked. Asa chewed his own portion. "Until we find somewhere safe." "There is nowhere safe." Asa looked at her. Mira turned her head toward him. Her eyes were sharp, despite her exhaustion. "Halston's militia will follow us," she said. "They'll search every town, every road, every hiding place between here and the border. They won't stop until you're dead, and I'm hung again. Then we stay ahead of them." Mira shook her head. "You can't outrun a man with resources. Halston has money. He has men. He has connections in every county from here to Tennessee." She paused. "Running won't save us." Asa said nothing. Mira sat up slowly. She winced, but pushed through the pain. "I want the plantation ruined," she said. Asa stared at her. "You're barely alive. You can't even walk without help." "I don't need to walk to plan." "You're talking about attacking a plantation. Armed men, walls, guards. I'm talking about survival." Mira's voice grew stronger. "They will hunt us no matter what we do. If we run, they'll find us. If we hide, they'll wait us out. The only way we survive is if we break them first." Asa leaned back against the shelter wall. He studied her face in the dim light filtering through the moss. "You want revenge," he said. "I want them destroyed." "That's revenge." "Maybe it is." Mira did not look away. "My mother is dead. My brother is dead. I was tortured and hung like an animal. If wanting them destroyed is revenge, then yes, I want revenge." Asa was quiet for a long moment. He had spent his entire life avoiding exactly this kind of fight. He hunted fugitives because it kept him moving, kept him alone, kept him from being tied to anyone or anything. Revenge was messy. It pulled you into conflicts you could not control. But Mira was right about one thing. They were already in a war they did not start. Tell me about the plantation, Asa said. Mira blinked. What? If we're going to do this, I need to know everything. The layout, the guards, the weak points. Mira's expression shifted. Hope flickered in her eyes. The main house sits at the center, she said. Big white building with columns. The master lives there with his wife and 2 sons. The overseer has a cabin near the western edge. Asa listened. The slave quarters are east of the main house. Rows of small cabins. Maybe 40 people live there now. The storage barns are north. Grain, tools, supplies. They keep the horses in a stable near the overseer's cabin. What about deliveries? Twice a week. Wagons come in from the South Road. They bring supplies from town and take cotton back. Asa reached down and smoothed a patch of mud near the entrance. He began sketching with his finger. Show me, he said. Mira leaned forward. She pointed to different sections of the rough map. Main house here, quarters here. Barns here, she traced a line through the mud. There's a hidden path the workers use, runs from the quarters to the woods. The overseer doesn't know about it. Asa marked the path. Guards? 4 men patrol at night. 2 near the main house. 2 near the barns. Armed? Always. Asa studied the crude map. He was already calculating distances, sight lines, points of entry. A sound interrupted his thoughts, the soft splash of oars cutting through water. Asa held up his hand. Mira went silent. He crawled to the edge of the shelter and peered through the reeds. A rowboat glided across the swamp. 2 men sat inside. Both held rifles across their laps. They moved slowly, scanning the water and the surrounding vegetation. Halston's men. Asa pulled back and looked at Mira. He pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded. Asa moved to the edge of the island and lowered himself into the water. He stayed close to the reeds, submerging himself until only his nose and eyes remained above the surface. Mira followed. She slipped into the water beside him and ducked beneath the reeds. The rowboat drew closer. Asa could hear the men talking. Waste of time, one of them said. They're long gone by now. Master wants every inch searched. Master wants a lot of things. The boat passed within 20 feet of their hiding spot. Asa held his breath. The water was murky and dark. Insects skated across the surface above his head. The men continued rowing. Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the swamp. Asa waited until the sound disappeared completely before rising. He helped Mira out of the water and back onto the island. She was shivering. Her lips had turned faintly blue. Asa pulled her into the shelter and wrapped the remaining cloth around her shoulders. Night had settled over the swamp. The darkness was absolute. No moon, no stars. Asa sat beside Mira and listened to the sounds of the water. Tomorrow, he whispered, we move north, find higher ground. Then we plan. Mira nodded. Her eyes were already closing. Tomorrow, she repeated. The mist clung to the trees like wet cloth. Asa helped Mira climb onto solid ground. Her breathing was steadier now. Her steps, though slow, no longer required him to carry her full weight. They walked north through the forest. The swamp fell away behind them. The ground grew firmer with each mile. By mid-morning, they reached the edge of cultivated land. A small settlement spread before them. Scattered farms, modest houses, dirt paths connecting them. Smoke rose from chimneys. Chickens scratched in yards. Asa knew this place. He led Mira toward the eastern edge where a black farmer named Jonah lived. Jonah was careful, quiet, and knew when to ask questions and when to stay silent. Asa had used his barn twice before, once to hide from a storm, once to recover from a knife wound. They approached the farm from the tree line. Asa studied the property. No signs of visitors, no unfamiliar horses. He knocked on Jonah's door. A moment passed. Then the door opened a crack. Jonah's face appeared. He was a thin man in his 50s with graying hair and deep-set eyes. He looked at Asa, then at Mira. Trouble? Jonah asked. Always, Asa said. Jonah opened the door wider and gestured them inside. The interior was sparse, but clean. A table, 2 chairs, a small stove. Jonah closed the door and bolted it. "Who's hunting you this time?" he asked. "Halston." Jonah's expression hardened. "The plantation owner?" "Yes." "What did you do?" "Nothing. He thinks I did." Jonah looked at Mira again. She stood near the door, watching him carefully. "She escaped from him," Asa said. "He hung her as bait. I cut her down." Jonah exhaled slowly. He walked to the window and peered through the curtain. "Halston's men have been riding through every town for 3 days," Jonah said. "Asking about a black man traveling with a girl." "How many men?" 6, maybe 8. "They're offering coin for information." Asa nodded. "We need food, rest, then we move on." "You can't stay here long," Jonah said. "If they come back and find you." "I know." Jonah studied them both. Then he sighed. "Barn," he said. "I'll bring food after dark. Don't light a fire. Don't make noise." Asa thanked him. Jonah led them to the barn behind his house. Inside, the air smelled of hay and old wood. He pointed to a loft above the main floor. "Up there. You'll be hidden if anyone looks inside." Asa climbed the ladder first. Mira followed, moving carefully. The loft was cramped but dry. Hay bales lined the walls. Jonah disappeared back into the house. Asa sat down and checked his pistols. Mira lowered herself onto a bale and closed her eyes. "We can't keep hiding." Asa reloaded one of the pistols. "We're not hiding, we're planning." "What's the plan?" Asa finished with the pistol and set it beside him. He looked at Mira. "You said Halston gets deliveries twice a week." Mira opened her eyes. "Yes? What kind of deliveries?" "Supplies, food, tools, fabric, gunpowder sometimes. The wagons come from town. Same road every time?" "South Road, always the same driver." Asa leaned back against the wall. "We hit the wagon tonight." Mira sat up straighter. "You want to steal his supplies?" "I want to destroy them." Mira's expression shifted. Understanding settled over her face. "He'll send more men after us," she said. "He's already sending men. This way, we make it hurt." Mira smiled faintly. It was the first smile Asa had seen on her face. "When?" she asked. "After dark. We'll need to move fast." Night came slowly. Jonah brought them bread, salted pork, and a canteen of water. He sat with them briefly and drew a map in the dirt floor of the loft. "South Road runs through here," he said, tracing a line with his finger. "The wagon usually passes around midnight. Driver camps near the old mill if he's running late." Asa studied the map. "How far from here?" 3 miles, maybe 4. "Guards?" "Just the driver. Sometimes a second man, if Halston's feeling cautious." Asa nodded. He memorized the route. Jonah left them alone after that. Asa and Mira descended from the loft when the moon rose. They moved through the forest toward the South Road. The trees thinned as they approached. Asa could see the road cutting through the darkness, a pale line of packed dirt. He positioned Mira behind a fallen log 30 yards from the road. "When the wagon passes, you scream," he said. Mira looked at him. "Scream?" "Loud, like you're hurt. The driver will stop to look." "And then?" "Then I take him." Mira nodded slowly. "All right." Asa moved to the opposite side of the road. He crouched behind a thick oak and waited. The sound of wheels reached them first. Creaking wood, the clop of hooves. A single wagon appeared around the bend. One driver sat at the front, reins in hand. No passengers, no guards. Asa glanced toward Mira's position. The wagon drew closer. Then Mira screamed. It was raw and desperate. A sound that cut through the night like a blade. The driver pulled the reins. The horses stopped. "Who's there?" the driver called. Mira screamed again. The driver climbed down from the wagon. He held a lantern in one hand and a pistol in the other. "Show yourself," he said. He moved toward the sound. Asa stepped onto the road behind him. "Drop the gun," Asa said. The driver spun around. Asa's pistol was already aimed at his chest. The driver hesitated. Then he dropped his weapon. "Don't shoot," he said. Asa kicked the pistol away. "On your knees." The driver obeyed. Mira emerged from the trees. She walked toward the wagon and climbed onto the seat. Asa kept his gun trained on the driver. "Where's the second man?" "No second man tonight," the driver said quickly. "Just me." Asa believed him. He struck the man across the temple with the butt of his pistol. The driver collapsed. Asa moved to the wagon. Mira was already pulling back the canvas covering the cargo. Crates filled the bed. Grain, tools, bolts of fabric, barrels marked with black powder symbols. Asa began pulling crates off the wagon and smashing them open. Grain spilled onto the road. Tools scattered. Mira found the gunpowder barrels. She rolled one off the wagon and broke it open with a rock. Asa unhitched the horses and led them into the trees. He tied them to a low branch where they could be found later. Then he returned to the wagon. Mira was kneeling beside the wreckage. She held something in her hands. Asa approached. He saw what she was holding. A small wooden sign. Blank. The same size and shape as the one that had hung from her neck. She stared at it. "They carry spares," she said quietly. Asa said nothing. Mira stood. She tucked the sign under her arm. Together, they scattered the remaining supplies across the road. Asa poured the gunpowder over the wreckage. He did not light it. Too much risk of the fire spreading. They left the wagon destroyed and the driver unconscious. They returned to Jonah's barn before dawn. Mira placed the blank sign near the destroyed wagon trail as they passed. She positioned it carefully, leaning it against a tree where it would be found. Jonah was awake when they climbed back into the loft. He brought them water and stared at the dirt on their clothes. "It's done?" he asked. Asa nodded. Jonah sat down heavily. "Halston will retaliate. He'll send more men. He'll burn farms if he has to." "I know," Asa said. "Then why do it?" Asa looked at Mira. She was lying on her side, eyes closed, the blank sign resting beside her. "That's the point," Asa said softly. Jonah shook his head. He stood and walked to the ladder. "Stay one more night," he said. "After that, you're gone." Asa agreed. Jonah descended the ladder and disappeared into the darkness. Late morning light filtered through the cracks in the barn walls. Asa woke to the sound of Jonah climbing the ladder. The older man carried a wooden tray. Bread, eggs, and weak coffee. "Eat quickly," Jonah said. "Then we talk." Asa sat up. Mira was already awake, watching Jonah with careful eyes. They ate in silence. The eggs were cold, but filling. The coffee tasted bitter. Jonah sat across from them and stared through the gaps in the barn wall. His fingers drummed against his knee. "You've made noise," he said finally. "The kind that travels." Asa swallowed a piece of bread. That was the intention. Halston's men came through at dawn, 6 riders. They're asking harder questions now, offering more coin. Did they come here? No, but they will. Mira set down her cup. "Then we leave." Jonah looked at her, then back at Asa. "There's something you should know first," he said. Asa waited. Jonah leaned forward. His voice dropped lower. "There are others," he said. "Fugitives, hiding deep in the woods past the creek. Maybe 15, maybe 20. They escaped from Halston and other plantations around here." Asa frowned. "How long have they been out there?" "Months, some longer. They live in makeshift shelters, hunt what they can, move when they have to. Why haven't they gone north?" Jonah shook his head. "Fear. They're too scared to move, too scared to stay. They know Halston's men patrol the roads. They know what happens if they're caught." Mira spoke quietly. "Why are you telling us this?" Jonah met her eyes. "Because what you did last night, destroying that wagon, it gave them hope. Word spreads fast among people like us. They're talking about it. They're asking who did it." Asa set down his coffee. "You want us to meet them?" I think they'd listen to you, especially her. Mira looked down at her hands. The rope burns were still visible around her wrists. They won't trust a stranger, she said. They'll trust someone who survived what they survived, Jonah replied. Asa considered this. He glanced at Mira. She nodded slowly. Take us to them, Asa said. Jonah led them through the forest an hour later. The path was narrow and overgrown. Branches scraped against Asa's shoulders. They walked for nearly 2 miles before Jonah stopped. They're close, he said. Let me go first. If they see you without warning, they'll run. Asa agreed. Jonah disappeared into the trees. Asa and Mira waited in silence. 10 minutes passed. Then Jonah returned with 3 men and 1 woman. They were thin, dressed in torn clothing, eyes hollow from exhaustion. One of the men stepped forward. He was young, maybe 20, with scars across his forearms. You're the one who hit the wagon? He asked. Asa nodded. The man studied him. Then he looked at Mira. Who's she? Mira stepped forward. She pulled back her sleeves and showed the rope burns around her wrists. Then she lifted her chin and showed the bruising around her neck. The woman among the fugitives gasped softly. Halston did this, Mira said. Her voice was steady. He hung me from a tree and left me for bait. This man cut me down. The young man's expression shifted. His jaw tightened. We heard about that, he said quietly. We thought you were dead. I should be, Mira said, but I'm not. And now I'm going to burn everything he built. The fugitives exchanged glances. Asa saw something change in their faces, fear turning into something sharper, anger. The young man nodded slowly. What do you need from us? The fugitive camp was hidden deep in a ravine. 15 people lived there, huddled beneath lean-tos made from branches and scavenged cloth. Children sat quietly near small fires. Older men sharpened sticks into crude weapons. Asa gathered them together near the center of the camp. Halston won't stop hunting you, he said. Not while he has power. Not while he has resources. If you want to survive, you have to take those things away from him. An older woman spoke up. We're not fighters. You don't have to be, Asa said. You just have to be willing to move quietly and follow orders. Mira stepped beside him. I know the plantation. I know where they store supplies, where the guards patrol, where the weaknesses are. We can hit him again. Harder this time. One of the men asked, What happens if we're caught? Asa met his eyes. The same thing that happens if you stay here doing nothing. Eventually, they'll find you. Silence fell over the camp. Then the young man from earlier stood. I'll help. Another man rose. Then the woman who had gasped at Mira's scars. One by one, the fugitives stood. Asa began training them that afternoon. He taught them how to move silently through the woods, how to watch for broken branches and disturbed ground, how to position themselves in ambush. Mira worked with the women, showing them how to create distractions, how to use their perceived weakness as a weapon. They practiced for hours. At dusk, Asa divided them into 3 groups. The first group would burn Halston's outer storehouse, a small building where he kept grain and tools meant for tenant farmers. The second group would free 2 laborers Mira knew were locked in chains near the property line. The third group would destroy a communication line that ran between Halston's estate and neighboring plantations. We move fast, Asa said. We don't engage unless necessary. We hurt him and disappear before he knows we were there. They moved out under cover of darkness. The storehouse burned quickly. Asa watched from the trees as flames consumed the structure. The fugitives scattered into the forest before anyone arrived. The laborers were freed without incident. One of them joined their group immediately. The other ran north and didn't look back. The communication line was severed in 3 places. Messages would take days to reach their destinations now. By midnight, all 3 groups had returned to the ravine. No one had been caught. No one had been hurt. The fugitives sat around a small fire, breathing hard. eyes bright with something Asa hadn't seen before. Pride. Mira sat beside Asa. She stared into the flames without blinking. "We're not done," she said quietly. "Not until everything he built is ash." Asa watched her face. The firelight made the bruises around her neck look darker. He said nothing. The fugitives began talking among themselves, planning, imagining what they could destroy next. Asa looked away from Mira and into the darkness beyond the fire. He knew what he had started. He knew what she was becoming. And he said nothing. 2 nights later, the forest camp had grown bolder. The fugitives spoke freely now. They laughed around the fire. They sharpened tools and planned the next strike with confidence that hadn't existed before. Asa sat apart from them, cleaning his pistol. He watched their faces, saw the way fear had transformed into something dangerous. Mira sat beside him, sketching roots in the dirt with a stick. "The Western storehouse next," she said. "It's bigger, more valuable. They keep seed grain there for the entire season." Asa nodded slowly. "We'll need more people for that. Better coordination. We have enough now." "Maybe." She looked at him. "You don't sound sure." "I'm never sure," Asa said. "That's what keeps me alive." Mira almost smiled. Then she returned to her drawings. Across the fire, a young man named Caleb sat alone. He was newer to the group, pulled from hiding only 3 days ago. His hands trembled as he held his tin cup. Asa had noticed him before. The way he flinched at sudden sounds, the way his eyes darted toward the forest when anyone spoke too loudly. Fear was normal, but Caleb's fear was different. It was the kind that ate a man from the inside. Asa stood and walked over to him. "You all right?" Asa asked. Caleb looked up quickly. "Fine." "You don't look fine. I'm just tired." Asa crouched beside him. "If you're not ready for the next strike, you can stay here." "No shame in that." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I can handle it." Asa studied him for a moment longer. Then he stood and returned to Mira. Something about Caleb unsettled him, but he couldn't place it. Hours later, Asa woke to the sound of movement. It was past midnight. The camp was quiet except for soft breathing and the occasional crackle of dying embers. Asa sat up slowly. His hand moved to his knife. He scanned the camp. Most of the fugitives were asleep beneath makeshift shelters. A few kept watch near the perimeter, but Caleb's bedroll was empty. Asa rose silently. He moved through the camp, checking the shadows. No sign of him. He walked to the edge of the tree line and listened. Faint footsteps disappeared into the distance. Asa's chest tightened. He turned and moved quickly back to the center of camp. He shook Mira awake. "Get up," he whispered. "Something's wrong." She sat up immediately. "What?" "Caleb's gone." Mira's eyes widened. "Gone? Where?" "I don't know, but we need to move. Now." Mira stood and began waking the others. Asa grabbed his weapons and supplies, but before they could organize, the first gunshot echoed through the forest. Then another. Then a dozen more. Chaos erupted. Halston's militia charged into the camp from 3 directions. Men on horseback. Men on foot. Torches blazed in the darkness. "Run!" Asa shouted. The fugitives scattered. Women grabbed children and fled into the trees. Men grabbed whatever weapons they could find. Asa fired his pistol twice, dropping 1 rider. He reloaded quickly. Mira ran toward him. "We have to—" A rope snapped around her ankle. She fell hard. 2 men dragged her backward through the dirt. She screamed and clawed at the ground. Asa turned and fired at the men. 1 fell. The other ducked behind a tree. Asa ran toward Mira, but another rider cut him off. The man swung a heavy club. Asa dodged and grabbed the man's arm, pulling him from the horse. They struggled in the mud. Asa drove his knife into the man's side. But more men were coming. Asa looked up and saw Mira being lifted onto a horse. Her hands were tied, her mouth gagged. "Mira!" he shouted. He ran toward her, but a gunshot tore through his shoulder. Asa stumbled. Pain exploded through his body. He fell to his knees. Blood soaked through his shirt. His vision blurred. He tried to stand, but another man kicked him hard in the ribs. Asa collapsed onto his side. Through the smoke and firelight, he saw a tall figure on horseback approaching. The man wore a long coat. His face was sharp and cold. Halston. He dismounted slowly and walked toward Mira. He grabbed her chin and tilted her face toward the firelight. "The girl who wouldn't die," Halston said softly. "You've caused me considerable trouble." Mira spat at him. Halston smiled. He released her and turned to his men. "Take her back to the plantation," he said. "Hang her at sunrise, properly this time. I want everyone to see." One of the men hesitated. "What about him?" He pointed at Asa. Halston glanced down at Asa lying in the mud. Blood pooled beneath his shoulder. "Leave him," Halston said. "He'll bleed out before morning." Halston mounted his horse and rode toward the edge of camp. His men followed, dragging Mira with them. Asa tried to move, tried to reach for his pistol, but his arm wouldn't respond. His body felt heavy, cold. He heard Mira screaming his name as they pulled her into the darkness. Then the sound faded. The camp burned around him. Bodies lay scattered in the dirt. The fugitives who survived had vanished into the forest. Asa pressed his hand against his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. He crawled through the mud. Each movement sent fresh pain through his chest. He reached the edge of the camp and found Jonah's overturned wagon lying abandoned near the tree line. Asa dragged himself inside. He tore a strip of cloth from his shirt and pressed it against the wound. The bleeding slowed, but didn't stop. His breathing came in short gasps. He closed his eyes and saw Mira's face, saw the rope burns around her neck, saw the fire in her eyes when she spoke about burning Halston's world to ash. He whispered her name. No answer came. Dawn broke slowly over the forest. Asa lay inside the wagon, trembling from blood loss. His shoulder burned. His ribs ached. He forced his eyes open and stared through the gap in the wooden slats. The sky was pale gray. The fires had burned low. In the distance, drums began to sound, deep, rhythmic, echoing through the trees. Asa knew what they meant. Execution Day. He whispered Mira's name again. The drums continued, steady, relentless. Asa's vision blurred. His hand slipped from the wound. The world tilted, and the drums kept beating. Late morning light filtered through the slats of the overturned wagon. Asa's eyes opened slowly. Pain greeted him first, sharp, burning. His shoulder felt like iron had been driven through it. He tried to move. His body resisted. "Easy now," a voice said. Asa's vision cleared. Jonah knelt beside him, pressing a clean cloth against his shoulder. "Jonah," Asa whispered. "Found you at dawn," Jonah said quietly. "Thought you were dead." "Almost were." Asa looked down. His shoulder was wrapped in strips of torn fabric. Blood had soaked through, but the bleeding had stopped. "How long?" Asa asked. "Few hours. Sun's been up since you passed out." Asa sat up too quickly. The world tilted. He gripped the wagon's edge to steady himself. "Don't," Jonah warned. "You need rest. You need—" "Where's Mira?" Jonah's expression darkened. They took her back to the plantation. Word spread already. They're planning to hang her this afternoon. Public execution. Asa's chest tightened. "I have to get her. You can barely stand." "I don't care." Jonah shook his head slowly. "Asa, listen to me. The camp is gone. The fugitives scattered. Most ran north during the raid. They're terrified. Halston's men killed 4 people, wounded more. There's nothing left to fight with." Asa forced himself to his feet. His legs shook. Pain shot through his ribs. "I'm not leaving her," Asa said. "You'll die trying. Then I die." Jonah stood and grabbed Asa's arm. "You go to that plantation alone. You won't even reach the gate. Halston's got men everywhere now. They're watching the roads, watching the woods. They know someone survived. Asa pulled his arm free. I didn't ask for your help. You need it anyway. Asa stumbled toward the edge of the wagon. He reached for his pistol lying in the dirt. His fingers barely closed around it. Jonah watched him struggle. Then he sighed. There's 3 men and 1 woman hiding near the creek, Jonah said. I found them this morning. They escaped during the raid. Asa looked up. Where? Half-mile east. They're scared. They want to run north. Take me to them. Jonah hesitated. Then he nodded. The walk to the creek took longer than it should have. Asa leaned heavily on Jonah. Each step sent fresh pain through his shoulder. Blood seeped through the bandage again. Jonah stopped twice to tighten it. You're losing too much, Jonah said. I'll manage. You won't. Asa kept walking. When they reached the creek, 4 figures crouched behind a fallen tree. They looked up as Asa and Jonah approached. Asa recognized them from the camp. 2 young men. 1 older man with a scarred face. 1 woman with gray streaks in her hair. The woman stood first. Her name was Ruth. She had worked in Halston's kitchen before escaping 2 months ago. Asa, she said quietly. You're alive. Barely, Asa said. The older man stood next. His name was Samuel. He had been a blacksmith on a neighboring plantation. We thought you were dead, Samuel said. We saw you get shot. I'm not dead yet. One of the younger men stepped forward. His name was Isaiah. He was only 17. They took Mira, Isaiah said. We tried to stop them, but there were too many. Asa nodded slowly. I know. The second young man, Marcus, stayed crouched. He stared at the ground. Ruth crossed her arms. We're heading north. We leave before sunset. I'm not going north, Asa said. Ruth frowned. You can't go back to the plantation. That's suicide. Mira's there. They're going to kill her. They're going to kill all of us if we go back, Marcus said. He stood now, his voice rising. We barely survived last night. We can't fight Halston's militia. Asa met his eyes. I'm not asking you to fight them. I'm asking you to help me get inside. Samuel shook his head. There's no way inside. They've got guards everywhere. There is a way, Asa said. Mira told me about a drainage tunnel on the east side of the property. It runs beneath the outer wall, leads to the old storage cellar. Ruth's eyes widened. I know that tunnel. It's narrow, barely wide enough for 1 person, and it floods during heavy rain. Has it rained recently? Asa asked. No. Then it'll work. Isaiah stepped closer. Even if we get inside, what then? Halston's got men everywhere. We'd be walking into a trap. Asa's jaw tightened. I'm going with or without you, but I can't do it alone. The group fell silent. Ruth looked at Samuel. Samuel looked at Isaiah. Marcus stared at the ground. Finally, Ruth spoke. She saved my life once, Ruth said quietly. When I first escaped, she hid me in the smokehouse for 2 days, fed me, told me where to run. She paused. I owe her. Samuel nodded slowly. I'll go. Isaiah hesitated. Then he said, Me too. Marcus shook his head. This is insane. Then go north, Asa said. No one's stopping you. Marcus looked at the others. Then he cursed under his breath. Fine, Marcus muttered. But if we die, I'm blaming you. Asa almost smiled. Fair enough. Jonah stepped forward. I can't go with you. I've got family nearby. But I'll give you what supplies I have. Food, water, extra ammunition. Thank you, Asa said. Jonah handed him a small satchel. Inside were dried meat, a canteen, and a box of bullets. Asa checked his pistol, reloaded it carefully. We move now, Asa said. We rest once. Then we reach the tunnel by nightfall. Ruth nodded. Let's go. They moved through the forest in silence. Asa led, though his body screamed for rest. Fever crept into his bones. His vision blurred at the edges, but he kept walking. Ruth stayed close behind him, watching him carefully. Samuel and Isaiah flanked the group. Marcus brought up the rear, muttering prayers under his breath. They stopped once near a shallow stream. Asa knelt and drank deeply. The water was cold. It helped clear his head. Ruth checked his bandage. Fresh blood had soaked through again. "You're going to pass out," she said. "Not yet," Asa said. "You're stubborn." "I've been told." She tied the bandage tighter. Asa gritted his teeth but didn't make a sound. They walked for hours. The sun moved slowly across the sky. Shadows lengthened. Finally, as night began to fall, they crouched in tall grass near the edge of Halston's property. Asa could see the outer wall in the distance. Torches burned along the top. Guards patrolled in pairs. He scanned the eastern side of the property. There, a low section of stone near the ground, overgrown with weeds, the drainage tunnel. Asa pointed toward it. "That's our way in?" Ruth squinted. "I see it." Samuel frowned. "Guards are rotating every 10 minutes. We'll have a small window." Asa nodded. "We wait for the next rotation. Then we move fast." They crouched low in the grass, waiting. Asa's shoulder throbbed. His breathing came shallow, but he didn't move, didn't speak. He watched the guards, counted their steps, memorized their rhythm. Finally, the guards turned and walked toward the western corner. Asa whispered, "We go as soon as the guards rotate." The guards turned. Their boots scraped against stone as they moved toward the western corner. Asa counted silently. 1, 2, 3. He rose from the grass. The others followed. They moved quickly across open ground. Asa's legs burned. His shoulders screamed, but he pushed forward. They reached the drainage tunnel. Asa knelt and pulled aside the overgrown weeds. The tunnel entrance was narrow, dark. Water pooled at the bottom. "One at a time," Asa whispered. "Stay low." He went first. He squeezed through the opening and crawled forward on his stomach. The tunnel was cold, wet, barely wide enough for his shoulders. Behind him, Ruth followed. Then Samuel. Then Isaiah. Marcus came last. The tunnel stretched longer than Asa expected. His breathing echoed in the confined space. Water soaked through his clothes. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, Asa saw light ahead. Faint. Orange. He crawled faster. His shoulder brushed the tunnel wall and fresh pain shot through him. He bit down hard to keep from crying out. Finally, he reached the end. He pushed through the opening and emerged behind a row of small wooden buildings, the slave quarters. Asa pulled himself out and crouched low. Ruth came next, then the others. They huddled in the shadows between two buildings. Torchlight flickered nearby. Asa listened carefully. Footsteps. 2 sets. Moving closer, he gestured to Samuel. Samuel nodded. 2 guards rounded the corner. They walked slowly, rifles slung over their shoulders. Asa waited until they were close. Then he moved. He grabbed the first guard from behind. His hand covered the man's mouth as he drove his knife into the guard's side. The man went limp. Samuel tackled the second guard. They struggled briefly before Samuel snapped the man's neck with a sharp twist. Both guards dropped silently. Asa and Samuel dragged the bodies into the shadows between the buildings. They covered them with discarded sacks. Ruth pointed toward a larger structure across the yard. "That's the overseer's shed." Asa nodded. "That's where they'd keep her." Isaiah crouched beside him. "We need a distraction, something to pull the guards away." Asa looked toward the stables on the far side of the yard. Horses shifted inside. A single guard stood near the entrance. "Fire," Asa said quietly. "Small one, near the horses, enough to make them panic." Marcus shook his head. "That'll bring everyone running." "That's the point," Asa said. "Ruth and Samuel, you two set the fire. Make it look accidental. Knock over a lantern, then disappear into the quarters." Ruth hesitated, then she nodded. "Isaiah." "Marcus, you're with me," Asa said. "We go for the shed, while they're distracted." Marcus muttered another prayer under his breath. Asa checked his pistol. 6 shots. He hoped he wouldn't need them all. Ruth and Samuel slipped away into the darkness. Asa watched them move toward the stables. Minutes passed. Asa's heart pounded in his chest. His fever made everything feel distant, unreal. Then, a shout. Orange light flared near the stables. The horses screamed. Hooves kicked against wood. The single guard ran toward the flames, yelling for help. More guards appeared from different directions. They rushed toward the fire. Voices overlapped. Confusion spread. "Now," Asa whispered. He moved quickly across the yard. Isaiah and Marcus followed close behind. They reached the overseer's shed. Asa pressed his ear against the door. Silence. He pushed the door open slowly. It creaked. Inside, a single lantern burned on a wooden table. Beside it, coiled neatly, was a rope. Mira sat against the far wall. Her hands were tied behind her back. A gag covered her mouth. Her eyes widened when she saw Asa. Asa crossed the room and knelt beside her. He pulled the gag down. "Asa," she whispered. Her voice was raw. "I'm here," he said. He cut the ropes binding her wrists. Her hands were swollen, bruised. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." Isaiah helped her stand. Marcus kept watch at the door. "They're planning to hang you at dawn," Asa said, "in front of the whole town." Mira's jaw tightened. "I know. Halston wants everyone to see." "We're getting you out," Asa said. "No," Mira said firmly. "Not yet." Asa frowned. "What?" "I want him to see me," Mira said. Her voice was cold, hard. "I want him to know I survived. Again." Before Asa could respond, voices shouted outside. The fire had been contained. Guards were returning to their posts. Marcus hissed from the doorway. "They're coming back." Asa looked at Mira. "We need to move. Now." But it was too late. The door burst open. 4 guards rushed inside. They grabbed Mira before Asa could react. Asa drew his pistol. He fired twice. 1 guard dropped. Another staggered backward. But more men poured through the door. Isaiah fought desperately. Marcus swung a plank of wood. Asa was struck from behind. He fell hard. His pistol clattered across the floor. Hands grabbed him, pulled him upright. A rifle butt smashed into his ribs. Halston appeared in the doorway. He wore a fine coat. His face was calm, satisfied. "The bounty hunter," Halston said quietly, still breathing. "How disappointing." Asa tried to stand. A guard kicked him back down. Halston looked at Mira. "And you, still defiant, still foolish." Mira spat at his feet. Halston smiled. "Take her to the tree. It's almost dawn. The town should be gathering by now." The guards dragged Mira outside. She struggled, but couldn't break free. Halston looked down at Asa. "You'll watch. Then you'll hang beside her." Dawn came slowly. Gray light spread across the plantation grounds. Asa was dragged outside. His hands were bound. Blood dripped from his mouth. A crowd had gathered beyond the gate. Townspeople, plantation workers, children. They whispered nervously. In the center of the yard stood the tree. The same tree where Asa had first found Mira. Mira was already there. The rope hung around her neck. She stood on a wooden stool. The overseer held the other end of the rope. He grinned. Halston stood nearby, arms crossed. "This is what happens to those who run," he announced loudly. "This is what happens to those who rebel." The crowd murmured. Asa struggled against his captors, but he was too weak, too injured. The overseer reached for the stool. Then, gunfire. Ruth appeared from the shadows. She fired her rifle. The overseer's head snapped back. He collapsed. Chaos erupted. Samuel and Isaiah charged from the slave quarters. They attacked the guards with axes and stolen knives. Asa twisted free. He grabbed a fallen rifle and swung it like a club. The guard beside him dropped. Mira kicked the stool aside and grabbed the rope around her neck. She pulled it over her head and wrapped it around the nearest guard's throat. She pulled tight. The guard choked, struggled, then went still. Asa fought his way toward her. His vision blurred, his body screamed, but he kept moving. Halston drew a pistol. He aimed at Mira. Asa tackled him. They hit the ground hard. The pistol fired. The bullet struck the tree. Halston tried to roll free. Asa punched him. Once, twice. Blood splattered across Halston's fine coat. Mira appeared above them. She held the rope. Her eyes were wild. She looped the rope around Halston's neck. "Wait!" Asa gasped. But Mira didn't listen. She pulled the rope tight. Halston clawed at his throat. His face turned red. "Mira!" Asa said. He grabbed her arm. "Don't!" She looked at him. Tears streaked her face. "He deserves it." "He does," Asa said quietly. "But don't let him write the ending." Mira's hands shook. The rope trembled. Behind them, flames spread from the stables. Smoke rose into the gray sky. Mira looked down at Halston. His eyes bulged. His breath came in short gasps. She loosened the rope slightly. Then she pulled it tight again. Clean. Quick. Halston went still. Mira dropped the rope. She stumbled backward. Asa caught her. They stood beneath the tree, breathing heavily. Around them, the plantation burned. Sunrise came slowly. The sky turned from gray to pale orange. Smoke rose from the plantation house in thick columns. Asa stood near the tree, his shoulder throbbing. His ribs ached with every breath. Blood had dried on his face and hands. Mira sat on the ground beside him. She stared at the burning buildings. Her expression was empty, distant. Around them, people emerged from the slave quarters. Men, women, children. They walked slowly, cautiously, as if the ground might swallow them. They looked at Halston's body. They looked at the burning house. They looked at each other. No one spoke. Asa forced himself to stand. Pain shot through his shoulder. He steadied himself against the tree. "Gather, everyone," he said to Ruth. Ruth nodded. She moved through the crowd, touching shoulders, speaking quietly. Within minutes, nearly 50 people stood in the yard. Freed workers, fugitives, families who had lived in terror for years. They waited. Asa looked at them. His voice was rough. "The master is dead." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people nodded. Others cried. A few collapsed to their knees. "The militia is scattered," Asa continued. "The overseers are gone. The house is burning. This place," he gestured to the plantation around them, "is yours now, if you want it." An older woman stepped forward. Her name was Clara. Asa had seen her earlier, helping injured people. "What do you mean, ours?" she asked. "I mean what I said," Asa replied. "You can stay. Work the land for yourselves. Build something new. Or you can leave. Head north. Find freedom somewhere else." Clara looked at the others. "And who decides?" "You do," Asa said. "All of you." Silence fell again. The smoke drifted across the yard. The morning light grew stronger. A young man spoke up. "What if they come back? The militia? Or Halston's family?" "They might," Asa admitted. "But you'll be ready. You know this land better than anyone. You know how to survive." Mira stood slowly. She walked to the center of the crowd. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I ran from this place. I thought if I could just get far enough away, I'd be free. But they came after me anyway. They hung me, left me to die. And I realized something." She paused, her hands clenched into fists. "Running doesn't make you free. Taking back what they stole does." The crowd listened. "This land broke you," Mira continued. "It broke me. But it doesn't have to keep breaking us. We can stay. We can make it ours. We can grow food for ourselves, build homes for ourselves, raise our children without fear." Clara wiped her eyes. "And if they come back?" Mira's jaw tightened. "Then we fight. Again." Ruth stepped forward. "I'm staying. I've got nowhere else to go. Might as well make something here." Samuel nodded. "I'll stay too." One by one, others spoke. Some wanted to leave immediately. They had family up north, dreams of starting fresh somewhere far from the south. But most chose to stay. They looked at the fields they had worked for years, the cabins they had slept in, the land they had watered with their sweat and blood. "It's ours now," Clara said softly. "We take it back." Asa nodded. "Then it's settled." The crowd began to disperse. People moved toward the fields, the cabins, the storage buildings. They started organizing, planning. Some gathered tools, others tended to the wounded. Asa watched them. A strange feeling settled in his chest, something close to hope. Mira walked toward the main house. The flames had died down, leaving only charred beams and smoking rubble. She stepped carefully through the debris. Asa followed her. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "The sign," she said. She found it near the collapsed porch. The wooden board was scorched but still intact. The words, "White man don't forgive," were faint but readable. Mira picked it up. She carried it outside and set it on the ground. She found a piece of charcoal near the remains of the kitchen. She knelt beside the sign and began scratching new letters over the old ones. Asa watched as she worked. Her hand moved slowly, deliberately. When she finished, she held the sign up. It read, "We forgive nothing." Mira stood and walked to the ruins of the main house. She found a nail and a piece of wood still standing. She hammered the sign into place with a rock. The sign hung crooked, smoke-stained, defiant. Asa looked at it, then at Mira. "You sure about that?" "Yes," she said simply. She turned and walked toward the stables. Asa followed. Inside, 2 horses remained. They were skittish from the fire, but unharmed. Mira stroked one's nose gently. "We're leaving," she said. Asa nodded. "I figured." "I can't stay here," Mira continued. "I can't look at this place every day, even if it's ours now. I just can't." "I understand," Asa said. Mira looked at him. "Where will you go?" Asa hesitated. He had spent years wandering, hunting bounties, sleeping in the woods, never staying anywhere long. But something had changed. Something inside him had shifted. "I'll go with you," he said quietly. "If you want." Mira studied his face. "You don't have to protect me anymore." "I know," Asa said. "But maybe I don't want to walk alone anymore either." Mira's expression softened. She nodded. "All right." They led the horses outside. Clara and Ruth approached with bundles of food, blankets, and water. "For the road," Clara said. She pressed the supplies into Mira's hands. "Thank you," Mira whispered. Ruth hugged her tightly. "You gave us this." "Don't forget that." Mira's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Ruth back. Asa shook Samuel's hand. "Keep them safe." "We will," Samuel promised. Asa and Mira mounted their horses. The morning light spread across the land. The smoke still rose from the ruins behind them. The sign swung gently in the wind. "We forgive nothing." Mira looked back one last time. Then she turned her horse north. Asa followed. They rode slowly at first. The plantation grew smaller behind them. The smoke thinned. The sounds of voices faded. Ahead, the road stretched into open country. Trees lined both sides. Birds sang in the branches. Mira breathed deeply. The air tasted cleaner somehow. Asa rode beside her. His shoulder still ached. His ribs still hurt. But the weight he had carried for so long felt lighter. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Behind them, the sign swung in the smoke-filled wind. A reminder, a warning, a promise. The plantation was free. And so were they. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.